you couldn't click it and get it, right? Like you had to figure out what the number was and then go to the contract and type in the number that you want. Like there was no UI to claim it on the website. You had to go to Etherscan to the contract and put in the number of the punk that you wanted and then get it and see, is that actually the one that you wanted? So this is like, people had to count like the count over, count down to figure out what the number was.
Wow.
And then claim it. And then what a few of the claimers have told me is that they were like, I'm trying to get this one. So I figured out what the number is. I claimed it. And then I realized I got this one next to it. So I got the wrong one. So now I have to like go back and do it again with one number up or one number down or something, I'm Sean Bonner, and I'm an artist and collector and technologist, and I try to help people understand how all those things mix together. So I first heard about CryptoPunks when they were first released. A friend of mine sent me the link and said, hey, did you grab one of these guys? And I went to the site and looked at it, and I distinctly remember trying to figure out how to do it, but I only had Bitcoin. And I couldn't figure out how to convert Bitcoin to Ethereum, so I didn't get a CryptoPunk, and then quickly forgot about it. Got reinterested in CryptoPunks when the kind of Web3 NFT art boom started to happen, kind of end of 2020, beginning of 2021, and my first, the first thing that sort of jumped out at me was how quickly the derivative culture around them was spreading. And this, I got really interested in how these very simple little pixel things had kind of caught on. In 2017, I wasn't thinking about CryptoPunks as like digital collectibles or any of those things. I was just sort of thinking of these things that people were grabbing or whatever. But I was also at that point approaching it from the perspective of an artist who I would just make my own stuff if I wanted. So I didn't like, think of the importance of spending time to figure out how to get I didn't understand the blockchain piece of it at that point. I didn't understand the digital object piece of it at that point. And so it was only later when I started to think about how art is working with the blockchain that I sort of revisited what they were and then realized the sort of importance of them. So yeah, so I got my CryptoPunk that is sort of recognizable to me and everything middle of last year from Tony Herrera. So who's an original claimer, and I got it directly from him. He was familiar with my work at that point and liked my position on it, and had some that he was trying to get into good homes, but we're not just going to be sold by somebody who's going to turn around and try to sell it. He wanted to have a good place for it. So when I first started looking at CryptoPunks, I was drawn to, the very obvious like smoking traits or these things. They have 3D glasses, these things that are very like right away and, like them, dislike them or whatever. But those were the kind of ones that got my attention. And then as I spent more time with them, I was like, spots is like a quite interesting trait that I hadn't paid any attention to before. Or like buck teeth works in ways that I hadn't imagined it before. And what I find now to be most fascinating is the accidental combinations of traits that create this whole other feel, right? So you can sort of look at some punks and just immediately imagine a character around it because it's such a distinct sort of things. And, maybe you can map those to existing people that or whatever else, but how, just these handful of pixels, randomly thrown into some order, creates this is super cool. I had certain traits that I liked, but I didn't necessarily think of that as like something that was going to be reflective of me in that way. And I also wasn't really sure if I wanted a punk as a PFP or just as like, I want a punk to have a punk. But when I found the sort of frowny pirate, I thought it was actually quite a perfect representation, especially because I like the sort of piracy history of the internet and those things, and kind of like being grumpy, all of those things. It kind of worked in a lot of ways because like on the website at the time, right, it was just this giant thing that you
this was how you viewed it.
This was the website. Like It was basically like, you had to zoom out or zoom in. And so there was no way to
sort this. So people are just dragging their screen around looking for something, right? So in that searching around, they would go, oh, wait a second. This looks like why is this one green? That's different. So then you found a zombie and like, oh, there's an alien or whatever. Yeah.
I don't know when I first started writing about CryptoPunks. I would have to go look at it. I think that it probably is early last year was probably the first time I specifically started to write about CryptoPunks. I was writing about, of course, NFTs and Web3 and sort of art on the blockchain a bit longer before that. And then, of course, just about art in general for many, many, many years before that. Coming at this from my art collector position, because that's my default look with crypto. I mean, it gets more rich beyond that, but my art collector feeling initially is that what you find interesting about this piece of art is that's what you should focus on, not what I shouldn't tell you what's interesting about it, right? So what I think is fascinating is that all these people are finding CryptoPunks and have their own reasons why they think they're interesting. The community aspect of CryptoPunks is super fascinating for people who are community nerds. I'm certainly a community nerd, and so I love seeing the different dynamics of how the groups are, effectively self-organized and what they've done with that, and how there's been different sort of leaders that have popped up and built things around their interests in it. There's some pieces that are more collective. There's other pieces that are more exclusive, and also how that's not apparent from a public perspective. If you're just talking about art, I think that that's also a super fascinating thing. You're talking about a 24 by 24 pixel palette that expresses an incredible amount of emotion, where one pixel is placed changes the feel of every single thing. So just from a visual and emotional conveyance aspect, that's a super interesting piece that you can just spend forever diving down on. So I do see them as different silos, but they overlap in a lot of ways. CryptoPunks is unique in a lot of ways because it ties all of those things together in a way that many of my other things have it. They've been sort of more siloed. So this has like a very strong community aspect to it, a very strong art aspect to it, very strong technology aspect to it. All of these things on their own are quite interesting. And CryptoPunks is just this incredible, perfect combination of all of that.
I don't know if you know this, but there's also like a huge debate in the punk community about which direction zombies are looking.
Yeah.
Oh, because the red is either the
right. So like these, it's all obvious. Like the people are all giving like a sort of left side eye.
Yeah.
Right. But half the people think that zombies are
looking the other way,
looking right.
They are.
But then other people are like, no, like the pupil's red, and so then they're arguing.
I can't.
I always thought that the eyes of the whites of the eye were the red part.
People have there's actually some pretty fantastic threads where people have gone into like zombie lore and how zombies are represented in different shows to show like, no, zombies have a red pupil. And then they're like, no, zombies have a bloodshot eye, and all of these things. So depending on how you initially think of this, they're either looking right or left.
What do you think?
I mean, I always looked at it as them looking right. Like they're opposite of everything else, right? But there's a ton of people.
It kind of is. It's weird to think of it the other way.
We need to ask Matt and John.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that CryptoPunks are kind of the defining imagery, of this entire art and Web3 movement in a lot of ways. I think that they have inspired a ton of people to do their own projects, to incorporate that imagery into their work. I think the impact of CryptoPunks on all of this is immeasurable.